let's say you get an athlete, a young athlete that's trained somewhere else, has learned some bad stuff like for a year or so, you get a hold of them. What's the first thing you should do to set them on the right path? What's the first thing you should look at?
Well, the first thing you do to set them on the right path is just make sure that they understand that it wasn't their fault, and also to figure out how to fix the problem without creating any psychological damage. You know, it's hard because everybody has egos with this kind of stuff. The trick is to come in egoless and just have the kid fixed and understanding how he functions. The big thing with fixing problems that you see is usually that it's been ignored weak points. So if the kid's benching incorrectly, it's probably because his shoulders are strong and his triceps are weak, or his lats are not strong. So the way I fix the problem is actually sneaking the problems into being fixed by doing the right warm-ups and accessories without the kids even really knowing them. I mean, I'm going to explain what we're doing, but I'm not going to explain that we're fixing the previous problems that are already there. What we're fixing is stuff in the warm-ups and the accessories that he's fixing without even knowing. So you can sometimes alleviate those problems without even really addressing them face value. You just see what the problem is structurally, and you base the workouts on those areas, and they fix themselves.
How do you approach coaching in a large group athletes at different levels of fitness?
You got to know progressions and regressions. So we want somebody to do a deadlift, but if they can't deadlift, you have to understand how to reverse engineer that deadlift to build them up to eventually being able to deadlift. So just like the Russians, the Soviets had their system, training needs to have a system. Just like kids go to school, you're not learning calculus in first grade. You learn basic math, basic add and subtract. That's kind of how we do training. It's a real simple system, and I always say it's so simple it's complicated because people want to complicate it when they need simplicity. And what it comes down to is I learned that weak is weak, and there's certainly an age discrepancy, somebody that can handle more emotionally, physically, but if you're weak, if your back is weak and you're folding over on a sumo deadlift, then I realized those guys haven't been trained properly. They also had to be trained on technique, you know, half push-ups, half pull-ups. So there's this starting point that I take into workouts, and then the assessment is ongoing, because sometimes what's weak in the off season, there's a different kind of weakness coming up in the in season for an athlete. So I'm juggling a lot of these things, and when you see this workout today, you'll see with that law of accommodation and law of specificity. The first time I trained with Matt was in March, and what was interesting is we did speed bench, but I think by the third or fourth set, we did a different variation of the speed bench. We did different tempo, pausing in a different spot. We will do that same thing for our athletes that have been here for a while. So if it's a clean and press,
Yep.
I might say your first two sets are going to be a dumbbell clean and press. Your third and fourth set is going to be a double kettlebell clean and press. And with an athlete, especially we train a lot of combat athletes, so football and wrestling, I look at when they get injured, it tends to be in these awkward positions. So once they start getting comfortable
Yep.
in a movement, I'm always saying to myself, okay, I have to prepare them for those uncomfortable, awkward, imperfect positions.
I change the way I do stuff about 5 to 8% a year, because I'm learning 5 to 8% more than I'm going to apply. Now I might learn 20% more, but then I throw half of it away as garbage and go, this isn't useful.
Right.
Maybe at this time. But like how I train now compared to how I trained when I was 35, 3-4 years ago is 10% different, maybe 20% different, because I'm evolving. I'm changing, I'm getting older. I might get a little bit more mileage on me, so I gotta train smarter. That's where the belt squat came into play. I had to figure out a way to get more volume in squatting and not get the spinal compression and loading. So I made one in my garage and cut it apart 5 times and put it back together until I got it perfect. But the point is that I started to slowly do more traction-based movements as I got older, which allowed me to do more big shit in competitions. But if I were using the competition lift in and of itself to get better, I would have had to retire 10 years ago. Make sense what I mean? So it's kind of starting to get to the point where you guys might be dealing with kids, but when you get older clientele, your training has to be even smarter, because it's hard. It's not impossible, but it's harder to fuck up a kid than it is an old person that has a lot of mileage. So
Kids are already showing up messed up,
though.
That's the weird thing.
In my opinion, the guys that know how to really, really train people are the guys that are keeping the top level athletes in their prime longer. Those are dudes that are like, they have to know everything in and outs. And most importantly, we'll go over today, they have to know how to get the athletes to recover quicker, because kids recover. When you're 35 and you've been playing in the pro ranks for 15 years, you don't recover like you did when you were a kid. If you do something wrong, your body knows it now. And you might be worth $5-10 million in a season. You can't afford knee problems or ankle problems or wrist problems from overtraining. So the more mileage you get, the more optimal your training has to be, because you don't have as much room for error.